Good evening. It is Thursday, April the 12th, about 9:30 p.m. This is Shay Gibson once again with weather flow, sail flow, and wind alert. Bring you a wind and weather forecast for the next 3 days. This goes out to the Charleston Race Week 2018, and we're going to go over some materials. Some of the material we covered last night on the YouTube video. If you go back to the Charleston Race Week Facebook page, you should find it in the event post. And then also we're going to go over Sunday. Sunday is going to be a wild card. Looks like winds could come up pretty strong in the morning to midday. And we're looking at hopefully getting the timing of the boundary arrival to be later. Usually these things get pushed back a couple of hours. We'll get into details about that in just a little bit. For right now, things are pretty quiet over the areas. We have high pressure built out in the Atlantic. We have troughing to the north, but basically a nice warm southerly regime coming up the coastline. And things have pretty quiet, like I said, just a few clouds overhead, some few high clouds. Low temperatures are starting to reach upper 50s to low 60s, and we should see those low temperatures top out in the upper 50s tonight. So we'll continue to have this nice warm weather to stick around for a couple of days. In fact, if we look at the GFS temperatures, high temperatures go into the mid to upper 70s. Of course, over the water where it's cooler, our sea surface temperatures are about 62 degrees. So we're only going to be looking at about mid to upper 60s if you're on the water. These temperatures are more indicative of what is more likely to occur inland. So for all intents and purposes, it's going to be more of a warm ambient temperature overall, which will help things out a good bit to keep things on the warm side. So GFS model, we talked about this last night, where we have high pressure built out here. It's becoming more of a Bermuda high at this point. And we have this ridge axis, which is an extension of the center of the high that's sort of extended down over South Carolina right now. At the 6 o'clock p.m. update, the initialization shows that the ridge axis extension is all the way down into southern South Carolina. I think that was dead over us today at some point, and we should continue to see this axis sort of undulate or wave over the coastline and stick kind of near the Charleston area, which keeps winds basically weaker below it, more of a south-southeast or southeast regime, and then just above it things get a little bit stronger as we become more south-southwest to southwest. So the Delmarva area and OBX, they're looking at pretty moderate southwest or south-southwest winds, but down here for us, just along that ridge axis and just to the south, weaker, modest winds, and that means just along the immediate coast. And we'll talk about some details inside the harbor here in just a moment. But I want to run this model out just a few days, and we see what happens here for Friday. I'm sorry, for the 6 p.m. or the 1 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon, still showing this ridge axis sticking around for a little bit. I think that in time we'll see this high not remain so flattened out. It'll sort of expand and become a little bit more robust because we have a system coming together out west, an area of low pressure drawing up a cold front that's going to be approaching the coastline. So that's going to make the high pressure a little bit more robust, and we'll see it become more robust as we get into Saturday. And then the isobars are lining up, so we see the winds really starting to come up. The isobars are not necessarily indicative of which way the wind directions or the isotachs are going to be. So even though the isobars are lined up in this direction, our winds could still be more like a southwest or south-southwest regime as we get into Saturday. And we'll have to wait and see. And that all depends on some of the sea breeze coupling that we get. But I think when we see modest winds Friday, we may start to see some moderate numbers start to generate on Saturday just along the immediate coast. And then they get a real big jump on Sunday. With that cool water inflow off of the shelf waters, the winds along the immediate coast tend to stay down. So we have a marine layer effect that sort of caps those speeds along the immediate coast to maybe low teens. But as we get inside the harbor, things change drastically. So let's go ahead and take a look at sail flow. And right now things are pretty quiet, like I said, about 5 to 7 knots. We are only seeing 9 knots in gusts here at the Fort Sumter Front Range Light. As we go in time, I think you'll see that most of the models are in agreement with more of a south-southeasterly regime for tomorrow. I think I called for about 8 to 12 knots, and then we get a little bit more inside the harbor. We're showing for Friday here that most of the model agreements bring upper single digits to near 10 knots. There's a couple of blips to 11 or 12. However, if we go inside the harbor a little bit more, I'm going to go into more detail here, and we did this last night too. We tend to see this direction once it crosses over land. We get some warm thermal activity over land, and then we get this sort of cooler shelf water southeast flow going over it, and then what we end up with is this thermal mixing environment right here just downwind of the land, and the winds actually pick up several knots higher than what you would see right here at Fort Sumter, just a mile or a couple of miles away, and so it creates sort of a gusty area, and where we could see 11 to 15 knots or even 12 to 16 knots tomorrow. just lee side of James Island, all the way extending all the way over to Chutes Folly, just off of the southern tip there. So that's a definite possibility if you're out there sailing and the race circles are out in this area. You could definitely see more winds than what you're seeing along the immediate coast or at the piers. So look for that. I'm going to go ahead and call for 12 to 16 knots tomorrow. Now as we go into time, we see for Saturday, and I'll run all the models for that. And Saturday shows a little bit more of a south wind starting to come up. Remember we talked about the cold front forming and the high pressure becoming more robust. Here's our southerly flow, dead south. Now if we get a little bit of a sea breeze influence, it could become more south-southwest. And in that case, we would see even stronger winds. So we're looking at modest winds. The models are shooting it a little bit low for the afternoon. Some of them are still single digits, but I'm going to say a little bit higher than that. I'm going to say 10 to 14 knots for Saturday on that south wind. And then inside the harbor in this thermal mixing zone where the south winds are coming across, I think we're going to probably start to see higher numbers like 14 to 18, maybe even 15 to 19 knots out there during the peak heating hours sometime between 11 a.m. You'll see the build come up, and then lasting all the way till 3 or 4 o'clock p.m. when the air temperatures start to cool, then you start to see the sea breeze start to work its way down on the speeds. So Saturday could be a pretty strong early afternoon through an afternoon finish, mid-afternoon to late afternoon finish. So be aware of that. We do have a thermal mixing environment out there that is very conducive for some higher winds. Now as we go into Sunday, we see the winds, a lot of the models really bring the winds up ahead of this cold front. This is a pretty strong convergent flow that is expected to occur, and there is some threat for severe weather. In fact, the SPC Convective Outlook has issued some marginal risks, some slight risks, and some other products, but it's still a little bit too early to tell what we're going to end up being as far as storms go, and then also the timing is going to matter. So I'm not going to do too much on the severe weather yet. Maybe till tomorrow we'll hold off on that as we get a better idea. Once we get within that two-day window, 3-day window, we start to have a better idea what the severe outlook is going to be. So we'll talk about that then. Just taking a quick look at the the NAM 3 kilometer, you can sort of see that cold front coming together, that rich, warm Gulf of Mexico feed up into that. We have an upper low that's going to be, or a mid-level low that's going to be coming across the Missouri and Arkansas area and into the Tennessee Valley, which is really going to add a little bit more energy to this cold front. And this only goes out to 60 hours from now, so it actually ends on, I believe it ends Saturday night around, or Sunday morning around 1 o'clock a.m. So we're not even getting Sunday into this high resolution model all the way through yet. If we get maybe 12 to 16 hours from now, once the I'd say the 12 o'clock p.m. NAM loads tomorrow, we may start to get a better idea of what Sunday is going to be as far as the NAM is concerned. For wind, 10-meter winds. Here's a better look at, you can kind of see that high pulsing offshore, the Bermuda High, sort of flexing in and out with heat fluxing in the day and retreating at night. And you see the 10-meter barbs coming up each day, mainly showing the gradient remaining offshore. So the Gulf Stream and the Florida Hatter Slope tend to get a little bit more wind than us, but I think we're going to see some pretty decent sea breezing coming in tomorrow. We'll start to see those mid-teens develop inside the harbor, and then as we get into Saturday, we'll see those upper teens develop, and then even into Sunday, we're looking at even gustier winds because that thermal mixing environment is going to be even greater. So we can start to see 20s on Sunday, and that's going to be the call for right now. I'll be back on tomorrow to give another forecast. We'll have a much better idea of what to look for Saturday and Sunday as time goes on. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching, and best of luck tomorrow for the start of the races. Have a good night.